It's a tale as old as time. Not long ago, cave paintings were found depicting a fierce battle between product managers and UX designers. True story. It seems everywhere you go, no matter the industry, the size of the team, the product they sell, in-house, agency, enterprise, or commercial, there is a constant battle between product managers and the UX team. Why? Well, I honestly don't have a great answer, but I can see what I can do to help navigate you through this mess. So stick around and we'll break it down. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome to the show. I am super stoked to have you. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are a regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. This week's audiobook recommendation is Project Management for the Unofficial Project Manager. I think it's pretty fitting, by Corey Kogan, Suzette Blakemore, and James Wood. The book addresses the increasingly common problem of people being tasked with managing projects without any formal training. And they offer some practical advice, including a 5-step process to help these unofficial project managers enhance their leadership skills and effectively manage their projects. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/audible trial to start your free trial and download Project Management for the Unofficial Project Manager completely free and help support the show in the process. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, and John for their continued support. And if you want to join those fine folks and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you can become a patron for as little as $3 a month. And if you do that, you'll get some sweet, sweet perks for your support. And of course, if you think this show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told some friends. And for more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing here, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. Well, welcome to the first installment of From Chaos to Clarity, or a UX designer's guide to thriving on a low maturity team. And today we're going to talk about the product team's operational maturity and how you can thrive in an organization whose product team isn't all that great. So before we dig into how to work with a low product maturity org, let's talk about software maturity more broadly. And we're going to kind of talk about this to set up the rest of the episodes. So I feel like the state of the software industry is kind of a mess, and I'm sure you've heard everyone talk about UX maturity and how important UX maturity is. And while yes, UX maturity is absolutely important, what I think a lot of people don't talk about is software maturity in general being somewhat low. Now, there are different models for determining the level of software maturity, but as far as I'm aware, there aren't really any regular surveys similar to what Nielsen Norman Group does every year with their UX maturity model survey. And obviously, I haven't worked on every single software team, but I have worked on a few teams, and I have talked to a bunch of other people who have worked on a bunch of other teams, and they all tend to say similar things. And in their experience, as in mine, overall software operational maturity in general is pretty low. And no matter how mature you want your UX team to be, it won't make a difference if the overall software maturity of the team is in bad shape. Now, software maturity is low because most of the subsets of software also tend to have low maturity. Product team maturity, engineering team maturity, agile maturity, obviously UX maturity, right? Any number of things. Now, low software maturity can lead to all kinds of problems for a UX designer. And when the overall software maturity is low, there's often a lack of process or standardization across all the teams. So what you might learn from one team, it might be totally different in your next role. And this can be true between different companies, but I've even seen it within the same company. Now, this sucks for you when you're doing your job right now, but this is really bad when you start thinking about longer-term career growth. Teams with overall low software maturity tend to be pretty dysfunctional, so the chances for career growth in your current company might be low. But it also means learning what you need to learn to be successful after you leave your current team might be hard. And ultimately, you might not be as valuable to that next company if you haven't learned the right things at your current company. So being on a team with low overall software maturity could kill your professional growth. So what does low maturity actually look like? Now, we've been throwing this term around, but what does that mean exactly? So let's think about what overall low maturity looks like and how these problems might manifest themselves for you. Now, when the team's overall software operational maturity is low, the team tends to be laser focused on the next thing that they need to build, super reactive without any kind of overall strategic vision or a plan. And this short-term thinking, it means that the teams end up working more like feature factories. They're just pumping out feature after feature after feature with no real idea of how it will be used, how it connects to the larger system. Processes are totally inconsistent. People don't tend to collaborate. There's tons of silos. People are overworked. And there might even be a few superheroes that everybody just depends on. They come in, they save the day. And without them, everything falls apart. It's likely nobody's talking to customers or users. Nobody's checking to make sure they're building the right thing. And maybe worst of all, nobody is ever interested in getting better. Everyone is fine with just the status quo every day. Or if they're not fine with the status quo, they don't really bother doing much about it because they feel like they can't change anything anyway, so what's the point? Now, of course, this leads to junk that no one wants, which I think can be pretty demoralizing for the people who are actually building those things. It'll lead to burnout and ultimately just losing interest in your work. So how does this impact the UX team specifically? Well, all this leads to a pretty rough time for you as a UX designer. When we work on a software team where there is generally low maturity across the board, it makes it really, really hard for us to do what we know is the right way to do things. You really can't have high UX maturity if overall software maturity is low. It's just not going to happen. UX is usually not involved at a high level. We aren't involved with discovery or planning. There's no real UX process. We get limited resources and support. There's no way to measure the success of anything that we design and build. And there's probably an overall lack of user-centered culture. UX designers want to be involved with discovery and planning, but way too often we see that UX designers are just being handed a list of features and expected to make them look nice with zero context. And this is super frustrating, especially when we know that we can add a ton of value to the conversation and help shape those roadmaps to build better products for all the humans that are using our tools. And all this leads to crap software getting shipped, frustrated users, and ultimately it leads to a real lack of interest in the work, which honestly, I think is a damn shame. And I'm not sure which is worse, to tell the truth, frustrated users or frustrated designers. All right, so we understand how low maturity is bad. Now let's get into the specific topic for the first in the series, that low product maturity, and we can see what we can do to identify it and then try to mitigate some of this junk that we have to deal with every day. So what exactly does product team operational maturity mean? Well, product team operational maturity is pretty much just what it sounds like, how mature the product team's day-to-day operations are. It's really all about the efficiency, the organization, the overall effectiveness of the product team specifically. Now, before we dive too deep into how the product team operates, let's talk about who's on the actual product team and a bit about what they're supposed to do. Now, unfortunately, there aren't a lot of standards across software teams, so the names that you might encounter might be slightly different and the roles might be slightly different. The jobs they have to do might be slightly different, but here are a few roles to think about. So program managers, they oversee multiple related products or projects within an organization. They try to ensure that they all work together effectively towards some common strategic goal. They tend to focus on bigger picture, higher level stuff. They're not generally in the weeds of the tactical execution. You might have multiple product managers working on individual products that are all kind of associated with the larger program. So multiple product managers might work with a single program manager. Agile teams may have product owners, and there's often a lot of conflict between product owners and UX designers who both think that they are responsible for understanding what users and customers want. So there's a lot of headbutting there. You may see teams with a BA or a business analyst, and this is more of a holdover from what I experienced when I was working in Waterfall years ago. And I don't see this a lot anymore necessarily, but generally their role is to define business requirements and things like that, not necessarily to execute working with engineering teams. That's not really their job. But it could all depend on the company. In a lot of larger teams with complex applications, you might see a technical product manager who focuses a lot on the specifics and the tactical execution. And they may work very closely with engineering teams, trying to, really getting into the weeds, writing user stories and things like that. On some commercial applications, you may see a product marketing manager, and their job is to deal with more of how the product is positioned in the market and sold. So they deal a lot with marketing and maybe sales teams if it's something like an enterprise SaaS tool. Now, depending on the team, Scrum Masters might fall under product or engineering or even operations. But generally, Scrum Masters facilitate a lot of the Scrum meetings, although I've also seen product managers do this. They don't generally focus on feature planning, and they deal more with the day-to-day execution. And I've often seen technical product managers or TPMs do the job of a scrum master on some teams. I know I didn't go into too great of detail of what each of these roles do exactly, but if you've worked on a dysfunctional team for any amount of time, you felt the pain of constantly butting heads with some of the people on this list, because there definitely is a lot of overlap with both the UX team and the product team and what we care about. And that's because in low software maturity teams, none of the roles and responsibilities are clearly established. And in fact, back in 2021, Nielsen Norman Group did a survey of UX and product teams about job responsibilities. And not surprisingly, the results were pretty bad. They surveyed 372 UX and product management professionals, and they found that duplicative work is frequent and ends up causing lots of confusion and inefficiencies. Surprise, surprise. The same survey also found that some professionals disagreed on who should be responsible for lots of important things like discovery and higher level early design concepts. So take a look at the show notes for a link to a couple of articles where the Nielsen Norman Group team review their findings. It's fascinating, and it's honestly kind of a bummer to read, but I think it's still important to do it. So operational maturity more broadly refers to how well a team functions and how effective the team is at achieving its goals and objectives. So in the context of product team operational maturity, it involves clear role definitions, efficient communication channels, structured decision-making processes, effective project management practices to make sure we stay on time and on budget, and overall team coordination. So to get a better understanding of this concept of product maturity, let's take a look at what it might look like for a lot of you out there. Let's take a look at a few examples of what low operational maturity might look like. And then we can start to figure out how to work through it. So imagine a product team that is consistently missing deadlines. Priorities change seemingly out of nowhere, on the fly. No clear communication as to why anything has changed. This obviously, it causes confusion with everybody on the team, and it'll most likely lead to delays and pissed off employees. And there's no objectives, there's no goals, there's no roadmap, there's no strategic vision, there are no metrics for success. There's a lack of clarity around roles and responsibilities, and this leads to all that overlap of work or critical tasks falling through the cracks. So basically all the things that Nielsen Norman Group survey found. So decision-making seems to be ad hoc. It's on the fly, which causes a ton of frustration. It might cause a ton of rework as decisions get reversed or changed depending on whose input we got. No one's really given time to plan for the future. Everything is done quickly with basically zero insight given by the people in key roles like engineering or UX leads. And once something is pushed to production, no one ever thinks about it again. No one bothers to get feedback. And usually not having any kind of OKRs or goals means there's nothing to even judge what would make it a success in the first place. So a really great way to think about a lot of this is essentially feature factories, a team throwing a bunch of crap at the wall to see what sticks. And these are all examples and typical signs of low operational maturity with a product team. You may see a few of these, and if you're not lucky, you might see all of them. So what does this low operational maturity mean for you as a UX designer? Well, basically it means your job is infinitely harder than it needs to be. Product managers have a hard time saying no to stakeholders. They'll give in to whatever someone important, quote unquote, says. Dates, resources, features, whatever, you name it. And there probably isn't a lot of cross-functional collaboration either. You probably hear something like, quote unquote, we're not ready for UX yet, or quote, we're not ready for wireframes yet. We're still trying to figure out what we need. So most likely you won't be doing much discovery if you're allowed to do any of it at all. You'll most likely just get a list of requirements and most likely a pretty quick turnaround time. And if discovery is done, it won't be done by anybody with any sense of rigor. It'll likely be done by the product manager themselves. So the quote unquote research will be biased and skewed and probably unreliable anyway. And you may find yourself, frequently having to revise your work because of shifting priorities. Deadlines are completely unrealistic. The people doing the work was probably never asked to give input on the feasibility of any of the timelines. You probably won't get added to important meetings. Nothing will be communicated well. And since there's likely a ton of overlap in roles, you might be struggling with unclear expectations because of poor role definition within the team. So the lack of structure and clarity can lead to designs that don't align with the product vision, if there even is a product vision, or they won't meet user needs. And ultimately, the time and effort is all wasted on these issues that detract from what UX designers love and do best, which is solving problems. And Hang Shu recently talked about this on LinkedIn, and he called out a huge problem, which is people ending up as product managers that have no idea how to actually do the job. And maybe they were brought on because they were subject matter experts, or they understand the market or the problem space well. And the only trouble is they are terrible at the job of product management. They might push their ideas of what the product should do over actual research. They might hoard information. They may hoard access to stakeholders or executives. And Hang's post shines a critical spotlight on a lot of problems that I've seen over the years with regard to bad product managers. Now, when you think about high product maturity, on the other hand, it's basically the opposite of all of those things that we just talked about. It's a dream come true. Product teams with high operational maturity tend to have very clear definitions of roles and responsibilities. Everybody knows their job, and everybody knows who to coordinate with for various tasks. Communication with the team is efficient and effective, which ultimately reduces misunderstandings, hurt feelings. It improves coordination across all those cross-functional teams. The decision-making processes are structured and transparent, and everybody understands how decisions are made, who makes them, and why they decided what they did. Product managers will push back against unrealistic timelines. They'll question the viability of features. They'll push for user research and realize they need the right teams to conduct research with proper rigor. So deadlines are realistic, milestones are clear, risk will be accounted for. So essentially, high operational maturity enables that product team to work like a well-oiled machine, producing high-quality work on time that solves all the user's problems. It's a sight to behold, I'm telling you. If you've ever been on a team that functions like this, you will know exactly how beautiful it is. And when you've had it and you've lost it, you'll definitely realize how good you had it, trust me. So a quick caveat here. At this point, you're probably like, yeah, Jeremy, I get it. Low maturity sucks. High maturity is great. But what the hell am I supposed to do if I'm stuck on a team with low maturity? I want to say this one first because I think this will apply across the board throughout this entire series. The point of this episode is to work with what we have, to work within the constraints and try to get our work done as best as we can. The point of this series is not to change the other teams, right? That's likely not going to happen. If you can, it's great. But that isn't the point of this series. The thing to keep in mind here is that your ability to change the entire organization from the bottom is pretty low. And I don't expect any junior or mid-level or honestly even a senior level designer to change the entire culture of an organization from the bottom. There's certainly a chance that you can change the org at a smaller company. And I'm not saying it's impossible to change it in a larger company. But if you're in a large org with hundreds or thousands of people, I don't want to set the unrealistic expectation that you can change anybody at the top. Instead, I want you to think about these tips. They're here to help mitigate some of the issues, to work within your constraints and do your best possible work as best as you can given the crappy situation that you're in. Now, first up, before we dig into some potential things to try, know that it might be perfectly okay to just get the hell out of there. Obviously, this is going to be infuriating for a lot of people, and you may end up wanting to quit. And if that's where you're at, please don't let me stop you. Now, with that said, there are a lot of people in that situation that just can't quit. And right now is clearly a crappy time to be looking for a job. So if you're in this position, whether or not you want to stick it out is totally up to you. If you want to quit and you can afford to quit, then by all means quit. Don't ruin your own mental health trying to make an impossible situation better. I think you'll know how likely you are to make any of this work within the context of your own team and your own situation. So use some of this at your discretion, but I hope it works for you. All right. So how can you, as a lowly UX designer at the bottom of the totem pole, navigate and contribute effectively when you work with a product team with low operational maturity? Now, I know I said I was done with caveats, but I want to stress that these tips are based on the fact that your team is dysfunctional, not malicious. Dysfunctional and malicious are not the same thing. We can have a dysfunctional team full of really nice people who we enjoy working with. The team just doesn't function very well together. That's a far cry from malicious. So all these tips are based on the fact that your team won't actively push back or undermine you. Now, be aware that that can happen, and that should also be a part of your calculus if you were thinking of leaving the team altogether. All right, so let's finally get into it. All right, the first thing to remember, and this is important for every group that we're going to discuss in this series, is to assume positive intent. Now, I want to highlight a quote from Nielsen Norman Group survey I referred to earlier, and here's what they said. While the survey results shined a light on issues related to work overlap, it has also unearthed a desire to collaborate and do high quality work. Even when remarking about problems, respondents did not finger point or have an us versus them attitude. Rather, they offered balanced, empathetic comments about other roles. We believe people are truly looking to understand others and how to work together harmoniously. So I believe this to be true before reading that article, and it just reinforced it for me. People want to do great work. Nobody wants to build crap software. Remember that people are more likely than not very eager to collaborate. They just may need a nudge in the right direction. Next, we got to understand the players. In episode 16, we talked about joining a new team or playing the game. So first you have to understand the players. And I like to create a kind of product team focused stakeholder map to show who all the people who make decisions are, what their job is, what their responsibilities are, maybe even who they work with, maybe even who they work well with and who they don't like, things like that. Take the initiative to understand the different roles within the product team and what responsibility each role entails. And if you do this, it will help you to know who to approach for different things and who to involve in different stages of the process. It'll help to identify who you need to work closely with, who might be an ally, who might be aligned with you, and who you might want to avoid. All right, next is to foster relationships and trust. Now, once you figure out who you need to know, you need to get to know them. You need to start to build trust. And I'm going to say this today and every other episode in the series, and I'll probably say it a million times after the series is done. You cannot build great software without great relationships. So use that map I just talked about to figure out who you need to build those relationships with. Some people will be great to just talk to, and that's awesome. Build those relationships. But for others, it will be critical that you have a really solid working relationship. So schedule one-on-ones, and it's better if they're recurring. Every other week, once a month, whatever. Get to know them personally. Find something in common to bond over. It might not seem like there is much, but I promise there's usually something there. No, I'm not suggesting that you need to become best friends, but you have to understand the people that you work with, empathize with them. Understand what they need to be successful. Understand what they want. Understand how you can help them. And as you do that, they'll understand how they can do the same for you. Now, I want to be clear. Some people will continue to be a huge pain in your ass. And this isn't a magic bullet, but this is one of the best ways to overcome some of the silos and the barriers that we often see in those low maturity organizations. All right, next is setting the proper expectations. And when it comes to low product operational maturity, you'll find a ton of overlap between what UX and the product teams want to do. Now, something to keep in mind here is that we really do kind of have similar roles when it comes to discovery. Now, it is the product manager's job to own a roadmap and deliver great software, but the difference is how you might approach it. When you have these conversations with the various product team members, make sure to talk about what you think your role does and how you think you will help support them. Make sure they understand how you perceive the differences in the two roles to see what they have to say about it. And kicking off a new project is a great time to reset. If possible, try to create something like a RACI chart where the team determines who's responsible for what, who's accountable for what actions, who needs to be consulted before decisions are made, and who just needs to be kept in the loop. And Miro has some amazing community templates to save some time here too. It's kind of a pain to fill out these big documents like this, but having this clearly laid out and available for teams to see will be helpful in streamlining the process later. And this is also a great onboarding document for new team members to review as they join. Now, when it comes to how we each approach our roles, I like to think of something Jared Spool said a while back in a training that I got to participate in. He said, product teams should worry about the product, the features, the individual things that the app can do. And our job as UX designers is to not focus on the features, but on the outcome that a user achieves by using those features. So when the product team and the UX team work together, our job might be to understand users and what they need to achieve the desired outcomes. And then a product team's job is to ensure that it gets built the right way. Now, this may change based on your specific context, and it is kind of a Venn diagram with overlap, but I think that this has helped me to understand how the two roles can work together without stepping on each other's toes. I think of the product management team and the UX team as partners. All right, next is to establish clear communication. Now, communication is critical, especially when the teams are larger. And this is going to apply across the board, so we'll be talking about this one again. But we need to make sure that we are proactively communicating with our team. One of the hallmarks of a dysfunctional team is a lack of clear communication. So if you want to get your job done, you're going to have to own this one. From a UX perspective, we need to ensure that everybody understands the project goals, the priorities, the timelines, deadlines, deliverables, who's responsible for things and any changes that might pop up. Don't wait for others to inform you. If you feel like you're missing something, go out and find it. Take the initiative. And when creating meetings, always have an agenda. After meetings, always send a follow-up with action items and notes from the meeting. If you're using a shared drive, make sure to keep the various directories consistent, right? Always label them the same or set up the directory structures the same way. All these things will help to build trust, and it lets the team know that they can count on you for being clear and dependable when it comes to information. All right, next is find some allies. It might not seem like it, but there are people on your team who are happy to support you in your work. They may just not know how to support you yet, or they may not know what they're supposed to do to support you yet, or they might not know how you can help them yet. Now, it's also possible they have no idea that anything is wrong. They're just used to the status quo. Now, regardless of what they think today or how they work today, there are people on the product team who may be more than happy to support your ideas if you give them an opportunity to do that. So, create some allies and some UX champions. Use your product-focused stakeholder map that we talked about. Use your one-on-ones to talk about the benefits if they aren't aware of the benefits and how they can support you and build up that UX literacy throughout the team. Use those storytelling and those influence skills to inspire the people around you to want to do better. You'd be surprised how some people will speak on your behalf in other meetings if you give them a good reason to do it. And once you've found those people, nurture those relationships. They can help spread that message and influence whatever you need to happen from within. All right, next, we need to build bridges, not walls. And this is something we're going to revisit again. Great collaboration helps to build great software, and you can't have great collaboration with silos and walls. Now, we can mitigate some of the issues in low maturity organizations by helping to facilitate communication between different teams. By understanding the needs and the challenges of each of those teams, we can try to help facilitate those conversations that cater to everybody's needs and helps break down those silos. Now, depending on your team and how they're structured, it's possible that UX is one of the few shared services who work directly with all the various teams like engineering, product, business folks, users, etc. So we might be one of the few with a bird's eye view of the whole thing. And if we are, we can use that as an opportunity to share information across teams and help to break down some of those silos. Now, when we have meetings, make sure to include those key people from multiple teams if it's applicable to try to foster that collaboration. If you realize that two teams aren't talking, schedule time with them together to get clarity. Don't assume that people don't want to talk. They may have just never worked this way. So give them an opportunity to collaborate. And when you have them on the call together, sell the value of collaboration. Highlight pain points that not collaborating has caused. Do what you can do to try to convince them that this change is really critical for everybody's success, not just yours. Next up is practice followership. So Dr. David Leitner talks about followership all the time, and I've learned a ton from following him on LinkedIn. Now, I'm going to have an interview with him on this topic here in a few weeks. Followership might be a new concept for some of you, but this is something that we can all practice regardless of our role. The idea of being a great follower isn't necessarily that we're following any one particular leader, but we put the organization and the goals and the values of the larger team ahead of our own. So making sure that we are thinking about this big picture and ensuring that we're always advocating for that shared responsibility is very, very important. Now, I know this might be hard in a low maturity org, but it is critical to commit and support after decisions are already made. Try to be courageous in how we deal with things that we don't think are correct. Being a great follower doesn't mean just shutting up and getting in line and not saying anything. And try to show initiative when we see opportunities to do the right thing and to improve processes. Don't wait for anybody to tell you. All right, next is normalize it. Now, this one may seem weird, but I want you to try this for a few weeks and see how it works. Just start talking about it as if it's a normal thing to do. Start talking as if they'd be crazy not to include you. Like, obviously you should include me and Jill and Johnny, of course, why not? Now, if you think you should be in meetings, talk as if it's normal. Don't ask, expect it. If you think you should have more time, talk as if it's normal. Don't ask. If you think you need to add metrics to track user behaviors, talk as if it's normal. Don't ask. And if you think we should be talking about outcomes, talk as if it's normal. Don't ask. Some people might fight back a little bit, but others will just assume that this is the correct course of action and do whatever you suggest. Now, some people will push back on this for sure, but keep it up. If you do this and you keep consistent, you might be surprised with how well this actually works. Humans are an interesting bunch. All right, next is show, don't tell. Now, if you're running into problems with the product team, they might not understand the value that you can actually bring to the team, and that's a real bummer. but it might be as simple as providing it for them, showing them. When you do research, make sure they are there. Work with them while you create study plans. Include them on the studies themselves. Take them along on ethnographic studies or phone interviews or usability studies. Show them what you do. Let them see firsthand how valuable this work can be. Let them see how much you know about users and the problems. Don't waste a ton of time trying to explain your value to them so they can include you. Try showing them instead if you can. All right, next up is adapt and be proactive. Don't wait for permission to do anything that we talked about today. Just start today. But remember, some of the things we talked about today might not work. They might not work at first, or they might not work at all. It all depends on the team, the personalities, the timing, the context, any number of things. And it's important to be able to flex, to pivot, to adapt. Change what needs changing. Work with what you've got. Remember, the point of all of this is not to try to create some utopian UX dreamland. It's to make a really crappy situation a little bit more bearable so you don't want to jump out of a second-story window. Next up is seek feedback. Now, a great way to build trust and mutual respect is to try to cultivate a culture of feedback. You may not be able to change the entire organization. In fact, you probably won't. But you might be able to change a few minds and get them to see feedback in a positive light if they don't already. Now, all the things that we talked about here are probably going to be off-putting and uncomfortable for a lot of people, especially if they aren't used to working this way. So encouraging feedback is a great way to figure out what is working and what is not. Treat the entire thing like an experiment. Find out what is working and what is not working. What do your teammates have to say? Are they excited about the different ways that you're trying to work, or are they unhappy with it? Encouraging feedback about your process and how you work with the product team is a great way to overcome some of those issues that the Nielsen-Norman Group found in their survey that we talked about at the beginning of the show. All right, now last, certainly not least, patience and persistence. Now lastly, I want you to remember one thing. If work is like a game, this is a long game. This is not a sprint. None of this will happen overnight. Change takes time, especially in organizations with low operational maturity. So stay patient, be persistent, and continue to demonstrate the value that you can bring to the product team. And they will slowly but surely bring about that change that you want to see. All right, y'all, we talked about a ton of stuff today. And just to do a quick recap, we discussed how to know when you're working with a product team with low operational maturity. We talked about several things you can do to mitigate some of these problems. At first, remember to assume positive intent. I know it's hard when you're stressed out and you're seeing things go to shit all around you, but people really do want to do great work, so help them get there. Try to understand the players, figure out who the key people are, what they want, and how you can help them. And when you've identified those people, build trust and some solid relationships. Remember, you can't build great software without great relationships. Now, once you do that, set the proper expectations. Let them know what you expect to do, find out what they expect from you, and share what you expect from them. And bonus points if you put this in a RACI chart, in a Miro board, or somewhere where everyone can see. Establish clear communication and try to normalize this behavior. Keep people updated, set agendas for meetings, send out notes as follow-up with action items. Make it clear what was discussed and what was decided and what the next steps are. Hold people accountable as best as you can. Find allies. Use your one-on-ones to build advocates for you, if not the entire UX team. It might be hard to push for total system-wide change, but it will be a lot easier to find people who are willing to speak up for you. Find them and nurture those relationships. Build bridges, not walls. Foster cross-team collaboration. If you see people that aren't talking, make sure to connect them. Invite key people to important meetings if you see that they're not on the invite. Practice followership. When a decision is made, commit to it and support the team. But be courageous in how you deal with things that you don't agree with, and show initiative when you see opportunities to do the right thing. Show, don't tell. Bring your team along and show them how UX is done and let them see the value that you can bring firsthand. And be proactive when you see opportunities, and be ready to flex and pivot when things need to change. Don't wait around for somebody to tell you to do anything, and if you think things need to be done, just do it. Build trust by seeking feedback from your team. Understand how they feel about the processes and whatever change that you're trying to suggest. And make sure you're normalizing that feedback and letting your team know that they can come to you if they have something to say. And remember, this whole thing is not easy. It is going to take a long time, so keep at it. Try not to get frustrated and don't give up. Well, all right, y'all, that's it for me for today. I hope to help to shed a little bit of light on how to work with a product team that isn't working at its best. I hope this was helpful for some folks out there, but I'm curious if anyone has had success dealing with product teams like the ones we talked about today. Were you ever able to make it work, or did you have to finally just say screw it and get out of there? Let me know what you think on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at hello@beyonduxdesign.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you like what you heard today, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would love it if you left a 5-star review. That would help me out way more than you can imagine. And if you know somebody who might find any of this stuff useful, why don't you tell them about it? That'd be fantastic. If you want to help keep the show independent and ad-free, check out all those Patreon sponsor packages at beyonduxdesign.com/support. You can join Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, and John by supporting the show for as little as $3 a month. And there are some awesome perks like a badass holographic Beyond UX Design sticker. You can get a shout out on the show every week, and there's even a package to meet with me for 30 minutes every month. And head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/audible trial to download Project Management for the Unofficial Project Manager by Corey Kogan, Suzette Blakemore, and James Wood. Sign up for a free 30-day Audible trial, cancel at any time, and the book is yours to keep forever. And in case you forgot, I've partnered with audible.com, so anytime you sign up for a free trial, you help support the show. There's no obligation, and you can cancel at any time, and the audiobook is yours to keep forever. So get a free audiobook on me and help support the show. That's a win-win. Remember to sign up for the newsletter and check out all the past episodes, along with all the show notes at beyonduxdesign.com. I hope you keep coming back for more great UX tips from Beyond UX Design. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX and design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all.